Welcome to Nothing But the Truth. I'm your host, Trudy Stern. For the past several weeks, we focused much of our attention on politics here at home, New York, Michigan, and what recent primaries may tell us about the future of our country. But this week, we're going to zoom out because while the headlines have shifted away from Iran, the conflict is far from over. In fact, many of the most important questions remain unanswered. Negotiations have appeared to stall. The Strait of Hormuz remains a flashpoint for the world's energy supply. The Houthis continue to threaten regional stability, and Iran's nuclear ambitions remain unresolved. The stakes extend far beyond the Middle East. Every development has the potential to affect global markets, inflation, energy prices, and ultimately the political climate here at home as we head toward the midterm elections. At the same time, there are troubling questions about whether Iran is using periods of negotiation and ceasefire to buy time, regroup, and rebuild its military capabilities. While reports continue to raise concerns about China's relationship with Tehran and its broader strategic interests in this region. While the world's attention remains fixed on the Middle East, another question looms in the background. Is China using this moment to advance its own ambitions in the Indo-Pacific, particularly with regard to Taiwan? Or are we witnessing something entirely different? A power vacuum and uncertainty inside Iran itself, with competing factions pursuing different agendas. These are the questions policymakers are wrestling with, and the answers will have profound implications for America's national security and the future of global stability. Thankfully, we have just the person to help us make sense of all of it. My guest today is someone that our listeners know well and always look forward to hearing from. Dr. Jonathan Schanzer is the executive director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, one of the nation's premier research institutes focused on national security and foreign policy. A former terrorism finance analyst at the U.S. Treasury Department and the author of several acclaimed books on the Middle East, Jonathan has spent his career studying the region and the threats it imposes to the United States and our allies. Today, he is one of the nation's most respected voices on Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the broader Middle East. It is my pleasure to welcome back Jonathan Schanzer to Nothing But the Truth. Welcome, Jonathan. It is so great to have you back.
Thanks, Trudy. Good to be with you.
So let's start with the big picture. Where are we today? Give us the State of the Union on Iran.
Okay, so I think the first thing to understand is that Iran's proxy network is pretty beat up right now, with one big exception. So the ones that are beat up include Hamas. They're right now controlling something like 30% of the Gaza Strip, and I think they're negotiating their own demise with the Board of Peace. Hezbollah, they're something like 25% of their former power, and they're negotiating their own demise with the United States. And the government of Lebanon, this is a really positive development. In Syria, we used to see Shiite militias running around loyal to Iran. The regime has changed. I don't love this regime, and we can talk about what's going on in Syria. It's not all great, but I will say Iran's not projecting power through that country anymore. The Iraqi militias are also weaker. The one big exception to that network of proxies is the Houthis. Now, this is that group out of Yemen, and we've seen just over the last couple of days, renewed attacks. We're talking about attacks against southern Yemen, which is where the internationally recognized government is. So we're seeing the potential for civil war to flash again there. But also they've attacked Saudi oil installations. And then on top of that, they started attacking ships in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. This is the southern choke point of the Red Sea. So if this actually continues, we're looking at now two choke points that the Iranians are trying to control. The first being the Strait of Hormuz, that's the Persian Gulf. The second being the Bab el-Mandeb. But it's the Strait of Hormuz, that's where all the action is right now, and everybody knows it. That's where Donald Trump has been focused. He's trying to get this waterway open The Iranians say that they're not going to allow it to be open. It's a war of words. It's a war of weapons as well. And it remains to be seen who wins this thing. Right now, it sort of feels like both sides have fought to a tie, which is not great news for Donald Trump when you think about the fact that, well, we're the superpower, and somehow the Iranian regime, through asymmetric means, has been able to maintain at least a significant amount of control over this strategic waterway.
And what is going on with the negotiations?
Well, I don't put a lot of stock in these talks at this point. We've been watching them now for what, the last 3 months, where, we keep hearing that, hey, Iran wants a deal. We heard this from Pakistan, or we heard it from the Qataris. And then it turns out that, the Iranians spurn us time and again. It has not been fruitful. I tend to think that at this point, these negotiations are pretty much a waste of time. I think that the regime understands that, if they capitulate to American demands, it's going to look like a loss. So it's kind of a game of chicken that's going on here right now. I also think that the regime understands that the more they allow this low-level battle to drag on, that there'll be a few things that happen simultaneously. I mean, number one, they won't have to deal with their domestic population, which hates them. I mean, 80% of the country hates their regime. And as long as there is a war going on, they don't have to deal with their domestic populations. They're still dealing with a crisis. I think that's kind of reason one to let this thing go on. Reason number two, they keep the price of oil relatively high by maintaining this crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. This is putting pressure on Donald Trump. They know this. They know that Trump wants more. He wants the price of oil to go down. He wants more stability in the region, and this is something that as long as they're able to play the spoiler, they're going to be pretty pleased here. And they also know that's going to hit Donald Trump with the midterms, and that's something that they continue to be aware of. That the more that they can keep the price of oil high, the more unpopular Trump will be in the midterms, and Democrats could come to power that would be anti-war and anti-Trump, and this could put pressure on them. The last thing that I'll just mention here, and this is also really important, the United States has been burning through munitions, our defensive munitions in particular, the stuff that shoots down ballistic missiles and drones and rockets. These things are not easy to produce. We're burning through them faster than we were supposed to. It's now been leaked in credible places, and I think we now have to acknowledge that it's true. We have a problem. And so the longer this war goes on and the longer we have to keep knocking things out of the sky, the more this benefits not just Iran, but also China and Russia and any other country that may want to challenge us in the future militarily. So there's a lot of things happening here right now that maybe we could say redounds to the benefit of Iran. But let me just say, all of this depends on this regime holding on. They are in bad shape right now. They've lost a lot of money. They've lost a lot of their military capability. I don't know whether they have the ability to hang on. And that may be why Donald Trump has said that he's going to maybe just try. The way he put it was he's going to low key the war. He's going to low key this conflict, meaning he's going to just keep letting the regime suffer economically and politically, and that maybe at some point soon things start to implode.
So, okay, so the question is, first of all, who is in charge in Iran? Is it the IRGC? Is it Khamenei, who we haven't heard from? Who's in charge? So, part one of the question is that. Part two is this really a strategy? Or is this not, like, is this some organized strategy to wear us down, lose our, wear down our munition supply, get us closer to the midterms, all of that?
Look, I mean, I think the answer to the second question is yes. I think it's a strategy, and I think to a certain extent it's working, because what we continue to hear is that in battleground states, Republicans are not really thrilled with this war. It may be dampening the desire to come out and vote in November. The price of oil is high. People are grumpy about that for the summer as they travel for vacation. It's not playing well, this war, and I think people expected Donald Trump to just get a win. I think that's what he expected. I think he wanted something that looked more like Venezuela, and he didn't get it. And so I think the regime understands that they're kind of wearing down the president's patience, and they're wearing down the American public's patience. And that does seem to be a strategy of sorts. Now, whether that means that they can walk away with a win, well, that's another story entirely. I don't think that this is a regime that has enough staying power. I don't think they've got enough military power. Look, they've got plenty of drones and missiles, but these are weapons of the weak. They have no air defenses. They have no real army at this point. They've got no navy. They've got no air force. All they have is the ability to fight asymmetrically while their economy is in a tailspin, and the politics of the country are, I mean, they're just, it's a disaster for them. Now, as for the political players themselves, look, you've got this kind of weekend at Bernie's scenario that's going on with Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the of the now deceased prior supreme leader. This guy, Mojtaba, his son, has not been seen since the first night of the attacks in late February. People keep saying that he's alive. People keep saying that they're talking to him. We've seen no sign of life from this guy. So it really does seem like a charade that the entire regime is playing, trying to give some clerical legitimacy to the whatever is left of the regime. Now, on top of that, we have had a number of players from the IRGC step up in leadership roles. I think it is telling that it's all people who are like over 70 that continue to try to lead this country. We don't see new faces other than, again, just the son of the fallen supreme leader. He's the guy that they keep holding up as kind of the youthful actor in all of this. Everybody else, these are holdovers from the previous regime, whoever has survived. And let me just say, if the Israelis have not jumped back into this war, right? Donald Trump has kept them on the outside looking in, at least for a time. If they get back into the war, my sense is they will go after all those next level top leaders. And then we would see a further evisceration of those senior clerics and IRGC people that purport to be running the country. They'd be gone, and we'd get to the next level. If Israel and the United States can adopt a strategy where they continue to remove those decision makers, I do think at some point you probably reach the bottom of the barrel. The regime starts to collapse, not just because of the economy, not just because of the military, but because you're just going to run out of top leaders. And that may be a strategy that has yet to be considered here.
Do you think that Iran is consulting with China, Russia, and that they are coming up with a strategy? And again, I say Iran, but we don't really know who in Iran would be consulting.
Look, I think that the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese have to kind of like what they see here. This kind of reminds me a little bit that the analog is what's happening in Ukraine, right? Where the Russians can't seem to get a win out of this. They've made some advances, but they've not figured out a way to get out of this war with a win. That kind of looks like what's happening with the United States and Iran. We're sort of stuck, at least for the moment. I think, by the way, the U.S. position in Iran is way better than the Russian position in Ukraine. I don't think it's apples to apples here. And so I think there is an advantage. But I will say that the Chinese have to be loving this, that if we're spending down those defensive munitions, that means that if they want to invade Taiwan this year, next year, the year after, and it's going to take us 2 or 3 years to rebuild those stockpiles, well, then they are going to have an easier time of it if they decide to go in that direction. If they decide they want to conquer Taiwan by force, we just may not be able to throw as much at them as we might have, some 6 months ago, let's say. I think they're aware of this. I think the Russians are aware of this. I think the Iranians are aware of this. So I think they're studying our vulnerabilities and they're trying to figure out ways to exploit them. We have a new book out at FDD. It's written by my colleague, Brad Bowman. He calls it Axis of Aggressors. And what we talk about in this book is that, Iran, Russia, China, and maybe to a lesser extent, North Korea, this is an axis. They are an alliance that is working together to erode the American-led world order. They coordinate closely. They understand one another's goals. And look, they're not going to put, like, China's not going to put Russia's goals ahead of its own. But to the extent that they can pursue mutual goals and help one another in the process, that's what this is all about. And I do get a sense that, China sees benefit from this quagmire. And again, I don't want to overstate this because I don't think that we're stuck there forever with Iran. I do think the regime at some point falls. But I do also believe that all four of these countries understand that the longer we're stuck there and the more munitions we burn and the higher oil is and the more frustration that builds at home, the better it will be for their access. And they're pursuing those policies because they understand this to be true.
Do you think that China is becoming much more aggressive with regard to Taiwan, just because they're taking advantage of a very good situation?
Look, I think that China's been talking about this for a long time. They keep talking about, reunifying Taiwan with the mainland. A lot of this right now it's information warfare, it's economic warfare, it's, just political persuasion. There is this sense that I think the Chinese are trying to convey to the Taiwanese, like, hey, we don't want a war. You don't want a war. Let's figure this out. Let's kind of do it Hong Kong style, where, it's, one country, two systems for a time, right? I mean, they're dangling all the different ways in which they can avoid a war. And then you have the Taiwanese preparing for, a painful invasion. The way that it's described is, they want to be a porcupine. They want to be as prickly as possible and as, I don't know, unappealing as possible to digest for China. But let me just say, I think that the longer this goes on, we see disorder all around the world right now, right? We see lots of different conflicts brewing. And in some ways, you could even say that we've watched the merging of the Russia and Iran conflict. There was that report, maybe I guess about a week and a half ago, where the Ukrainians attacked a ship that was bringing weapons to the Iranians, or maybe it was from the Iranians to Russia, and they knocked out a ship in the Caspian Sea. This is that indication that the fronts are merging. And what we don't really want to see right now is for, Taiwan to merge into this as well. So there's a lot of conflict management that needs to be done by the Trump administration to try to keep things at a low simmer for a time. This is not easy. Tensions are high right now around the world as, again, as we watch all these conflicts play out independently. And, when these Axis powers are working together, it may not be independent for long.
Do you think that that China feels that everyone's attention is not on them right now? Like, forget the strategic benefits of America, wearing down our weapons and having to fight against a different, in a different region. But do you think also they're benefiting and they feel that they can benefit from the fact that our attentions are just everyone's attentions are on something else?
Oh yeah. And by the way, there are a lot of folks in Washington right now who say that, this war that we're waging in Iran is a distraction from our real national interest, that the only thing that we really should care about right now is Taiwan. The only thing that we should care about is great power competition with China, and that the more we spend munitions or dollars or anything else on lesser conflicts, the less prepared we're going to be. And there is some validity to that. I mean, I do also believe that, defeating the Iranians would be enormously beneficial for the United States. We could remake the Middle East in ways that would benefit all of our allies. We would have, enormous energy resources that we could tap as a result of this. And we could try to bring some calm to what has been a very unstable region for decades. But I think the thing that folks need to understand here is, number one, China does want to supplant us. They want to be the number one world power. They want to leapfrog us. They want to move past us quickly, and they want to dominate. And the way they want to do that is through technology primarily, but also through military means. The tech is the thing that I worry about the most right now. Right? We are in the middle of an AI battle with China. We are the two top developers of artificial intelligence, and I'd say that the understanding about the way the world works right now suggests that whoever wins this battle will be the superpower for maybe centuries to come, that this is going to be such a powerful technology. And the thing that I worry about is that Taiwan is home to our most important chip producer, our most important fab. All of the chips that we need for maybe not all, but a lot of them come from the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC. TSMC, if it fell into the hands of China, we would be in deep trouble. The Chinese would be able to arrest our development of AI, and they would be able to not quickly move ahead, but if we were stuck without that fab, and we are trying, by the way, to build them in places like Arizona and Ohio, but it's not happening as quickly as we'd like. And there are fabs in other places that we can rely on, but no one does it like TSMC. We can't lose it. We've got to defend it. And I think in that sense, I think we need to start to think about recalibrating our strategy to make sure that we are devoting enough resources to the defense of Taiwan, that China understands that they cannot bully us when it comes to Taiwan because of how important this is to our national security and the advancement of our national interests, particularly in AI.
Okay. One more difficult thing that we need to look at. So thank you for explaining all that. Before we move out of the Middle East, though, we're hearing about a new regional alignment, the growing cooperation between Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Look, there's one country that's missing out of this alliance that may yet join, and that's Egypt. We talk about this alliance structure through an acronym called STEP, Saudi, Turkey, Egypt, Pakistan. And STEP really does appear to be I think maybe let's talk about it from two perspectives. Number one, we're watching the Iranian regime start to unravel, and it doesn't have the power projection that it once had, right, by way of proxy or its direct threats to a lot of the rest of the region. And so what you have is, as this one power begins to unravel, there is a sense among the Sunni countries of the region, and every one of these four countries, they are Sunni, and the Iranians are Shiite. This is a rivalry that dates back centuries. They would like to supplant the Iranians. They want to take over the space that the Iranians are, they're receding, whether they like it or not. And so when you think about it, these are Sunni countries. They represent 80% of the Muslim world, right? 80% of the Muslim world is Sunni. They see themselves as the natural inheritors of this region. And so you have Turkey, the second largest army in NATO, pairing up with Pakistan, a nuclear power, pairing up with the Saudis, the custodians of the two holy mosques, and really unlimited wealth, at least for now, with the energy resources that they have. And then Egypt, with a somewhat powerful army, I think the most populous country in the Arab world, joining forces. So I think number one, think about it as just, a new order that they're trying to establish in the region. I think it's a challenge to Iran. I think it's a challenge, by the way, to the Israelis too. I think that none of these countries right now are particularly friendly with the Israelis. Look, you could say the Saudis were on the doorstep of normalization. This agreement looks like they're taking a step in the other direction. And when you look at what the Turks have been saying about Israel in particular, these guys are Hamas supporters and Muslim Brotherhood supporters and Al-Qaeda. They're jihadists at the end of the day. They are anti-Israel. And so you get a sense that this could be, I don't know, swapping out one really nasty power for a handful of others. I would watch this space very carefully. I don't think this portends stability in the region. But the other thing that I think we all need to acknowledge here is, in the aftermath of the Abraham Accords in 2020, we started hearing about a new trade agreement or new trade corridor that was being envisioned by the United States and some of its partners in the region. It's called IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Energy Corridor. And the idea is that there would be cheap goods coming from India shipped to the Persian Gulf. And from the Persian Gulf, the Emirates and maybe the Saudis would then ship this stuff over through Israel and then it would arrive in Greece and Cyprus for the benefit of Europe, and that this trade route was going to be kind of the future of the region, a pro-America alliance that was unified in trade. By the way, energy would be part of this as well. So you'd get, Persian Gulf energy to Europe by way of this alliance structure. So here's the interesting thing. The Saudis were supposed to be a linchpin for this, right? They were going to be part of this. By choosing to join with this STEP alliance, this new, defense alliance, they're allying with Pakistan, which is like a mortal enemy of India. And then also the Turks, and they are, of course, anti-Israel, but also anti-Greece and anti-Cyprus. It looks like the Saudis have joined the anti-IMEC alliance. It looks like they have spurned this US-led structure and that they're choosing this other thing instead. Now, if you ask the Saudis, they're going to say, well, we can do both. Why do we have to choose? I'd like to see whether they remain committed to IMEC as well, or whether we really are watching a kind of spurning of IMEC and a change in Saudi posture that could have real ramifications for the US-led alliance in the Middle East and trade for decades to come. So watch this space closely. It's more than just, hey, we're going to defend Saudi Arabia if it gets hit by Iran, which of course nobody's lifted a finger for yet. But it's way more than just a defense alliance. It could be a trade alliance as well.
And do you see Israel very like strengthening its alliance with India?
Yes. I mean, the day before this alliance was announced, there was a phone call between Modi and Bibi, and they talked about their bilateral ties. And of course, we've got the Greeks and the Cypriots that have had very good relations with the Israelis over the last, chunk of time. What's really interesting to me, though, is that, just a few days before this alliance was announced, the Greeks shot down 2 missiles over Saudi Arabia. So the Greeks they're in there, right? They're trying to be good allies to the Saudis. And it looks like the Saudis don't care. The Saudis are saying, we're going to choose Turkey over you, Greece. We're very sorry about that. Or maybe we're not sorry at all. I think the best way to understand this right now is these alliances right now are very much shifting in real time. You have a bunch of countries that are nervous about the vacuum that is being left by Iran. They're thinking about the future of the region and where the power might lie. And even though Israel has, I think, gotten the better of all of the proxies and Iran in this war, I do think that the inability of the United States to get a full handle on this Iran threat in the Strait of Hormuz, I think it's starting to spook some of these Sunni countries, and they're beginning to think that they can rely on themselves more than they can rely on the United States. Let me just tell you, I think that's a huge mistake. I think that none of these countries have the ability to defend themselves the way that the United States can defend them. Yes, we have a shortage right now in defensive munitions. And true, we've not cracked the code as it relates to the Strait of Hormuz. But a lot can change very quickly here. This is a pretty dynamic situation. The war has yielded a ton of unintended consequences. I think that we're still going to see a lot more change before we start to reach a place of equilibrium. And by the time we reach that equilibrium, I'll be fascinated to see whether this alliance structure still holds. I've got questions, and I don't think they're going to be easily answered. These are weak states, and they're not particularly well organized. And so it remains to be seen. But it is, at least for now, a challenge to the American-led structures. It's a challenge to IMEC. It's a challenge to, I think, the way that Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United States, and other countries have viewed the future of the region.
Do you think it's a mistake for President Trump to be selling F-35s to Saudi Arabia? And I think he was going to sell them to Turkey too.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a mistake, especially right now, to be giving. I mean, we also just offered the Saudis civilian nuclear technology. We were going to give them an okay on that. I think when they indicated that they're moving out of the IMEC orbit and into STEP, I think this should have been the moment where we said, all right, stop the presses. We're going to have to make some changes. The Turks We should never have included them in the F-35 program. I'm glad we booted them out. It was for good reason. They actually acquired the Russian-made S-400 system. This is an air defense system that they should never have bought. If you're part of NATO, you don't go around buying, Russian tech. This is just insane. So, I think, and by the way, it's not just that, right? The Turks they're Hamas supporters, they're Al Qaeda supporters, they're Muslim Brotherhood supporters. These guys are, I mean, they helped money launder for the Islamic Republic of Iran 10 years ago. These people are not to be trusted. And I'm not sure we can trust the Saudis right now as they go through this sort of midlife crisis about who they want to be married to. Between both of these things, I think, it'll be interesting to see. I can't imagine, and you probably know this better than I do, I can't imagine that Republicans are going to want to challenge Trump right now, heading into the midterms in November. But I can imagine that real debates will emerge shortly thereafter. In other words, once elections are in the rear view and Republicans have the ability to raise this, my guess is that you have congressmen and senators Senator Langford, Senator Risch, Senator Cotton. None of these guys are particularly happy about what's going on here. They've got questions about the Turks and the weapons that we may want to sell them. But I think they have more questions about the alliance itself, whether these guys are reliable partners. I think they will probably raise questions about Saudi Arabia as well. They understand that the Israelis and the Greeks and others are better allies for the United States, but I don't think that's going to come out in debate. My guess is until after early November.
Wow. Jonathan, as always, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your expertise, breaking it all down for us, explaining it all to us. In a world where events move so quickly and the headlines change I was going to say every day, but I mean every minute. So your thoughtful analysis really just helps us understand what's happening and why all of this matters and where everything fits in. So we appreciate your perspective, and we thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Nothing But the Truth. You can catch us every Thursday night at 9:30 on the radio, or listen to this episode and all of our past episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay strong, stay safe, stay informed, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.